He'd spent years carving out a quiet life in the wild, where no one disturbed his peace, until one stormy night, two young cowgirls pounded at his door, begging for shelter. He'd heard enough stories to know trouble often came in pairs. What he discovered about their past, and why fate brought them to his ranch, would upend everything he thought he knew about solitude, trust, and the true meaning of home. Under the endless stretch of Arizona's sky, a battered ranch lay tucked between red mesas and the winding river below. Every morning, as the sun crept over the horizon, Sani Greyhawk tended his land with the steady patience of someone who'd learned long ago that the world rewarded quiet hands and an even quieter heart. Sani had built the ranch himself, board by board and fence post by fence post. After leaving behind the chaos of reservation politics and broken promises, here he answered to no one. The only voices he welcomed were those of the coyotes at dusk and the wind brushing through juniper trees. He was Apache by blood, but in town they called him the Ghost on the Hill because he never asked for help and never gave any trouble. His neighbors kept their distance, some out of respect, others out of old prejudice, but Sani didn't mind. He liked the routine of solitary days, fixing the well, riding the fence line, cooking simple meals over the fire, and falling asleep to the hush of the desert. He didn't hate people. He simply preferred the company of the land. After all, out here, silence was its own kind of freedom. But even in the vastest wilderness, peace is never guaranteed. That night, just as Sani settled in with a mug of black coffee and the low rumble of thunder promising rain, a frantic pounding shattered the stillness. He froze, every muscle tense, listening to the strange rhythm of desperate fists against his door. Few dared venture this far after dark, and fewer still arrived unannounced. Outside, rain whipped sideways, turning dust to mud, and lightning flickered in the distance. When he opened the door, two drenched figures stumbled into the lamplight. A pair of young women, hats drooping, eyes wide with fear. Their boots squelched on the floorboards. For a moment, Sani only stared, uncertain if this was some bad memory returned, or the beginning of trouble he couldn't ignore. "Please, sir," the taller one gasped, her voice rough from the wind. "We don't mean no harm. We just need a place to wait out the storm." The other, younger and shivering, clung to her side, glancing back into the darkness as if afraid someone or something might be following. Sani knew what it was to run from things you couldn't name. Against every instinct, he nodded, stepping aside to let them in. As thunder rolled overhead and the storm sealed the house in darkness, Sani sensed his peaceful existence was about to unravel. He had no way of knowing the truth, that these two strangers were carrying secrets heavy enough to change his life forever. The storm raged outside, wind hammering against the thin walls of the ranch house as Sani hurried to add more wood to the fire. The two girls stood near the door, dripping onto the worn floorboards, uncertainty flickering in their eyes as they took in the sparse but tidy room. Sani's house was simple: a table, two chairs, a bed pushed up under the window, and the stone hearth crackling with new warmth. There was no clutter, no sign of luxury, only the bare necessities of a man used to solitude. He eyed the newcomers cautiously, his instincts, honed by years spent surviving both wild country and wilder men, telling him to keep a wary distance. But he noticed their hands were empty, no weapons in sight. Their faces, flushed with cold, were marked more by fear than by guile. He gestured toward the fire. "Dry off," he said simply. "You can leave your boots by the door." The older girl, tall, with sharp cheekbones and a stubborn set to her jaw, nodded. She helped the younger one slip off her soaked boots, then crouched in front of the fire, rubbing her hands together. The younger, maybe 16 or 17, wrapped her arms around her knees, silent but watching everything with large, wary eyes. Sani could see the dirt beneath her nails, the bruises peeking above her collar, and the way her shoulder trembled, not just from cold but from exhaustion or fear. "Names?" Sani asked, keeping his voice low, not wanting to spook them further. The older girl hesitated, exchanging a glance with her companion. Finally, she spoke. "I'm Lila. This here's my sister, May. We got caught in the storm coming from the west." Her words were careful, rehearsed, but the fear behind them was real. "Long way from anywhere," Sani replied. "You got people looking for you." Again, a pause. Lila bit her lip, then shook her head. "No one coming after us." "Not anymore," Sani grunted, pretending to accept the answer, though he knew better. No one crossed these badlands without reason. He poured water from the kettle into tin cups, adding a bit of strong coffee to each, and handed them over. May took hers with both hands, sipping slowly as if savoring the smallest comfort. Lila kept glancing toward the window, as if afraid someone else might appear from the storm. For a time, the room filled with the sounds of the storm, the crackle of fire, and the quiet clink of cups against the table. Sani let them be, focusing instead on the steady rhythm of the rain. He wasn't a man to press for stories, but he noticed how Lila's shoulders seemed to drop as the warmth seeped in, and how May's shivering gradually faded. Only when he caught May staring at the row of Apache beading on his jacket did Sani speak again. "You hungry?" he asked, rising to fetch a loaf of bread and a pot of beans from the stove. May nodded, eyes wide with relief. The girls ate with a hunger that surprised him, barely pausing between mouthfuls, but Lila never stopped watching the door. When their plates were clean, Sani finally broke the silence. "You two are running," he said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. Lila looked at him, her jaw tight. "We just needed somewhere to hide for the night. We can pay, if you want." Sani shook his head. "I'm not interested in your money." He sat back, regarding them both. "But I don't want trouble. If there's someone after you, I need to know." May spoke up then, her voice small but clear. We just needed to get away." The words seemed to cost her, and Lila squeezed her hand, eyes shining with something between pride and grief. Sani nodded slowly, understanding more than he let on. He'd seen enough of the world's cruelty to know when someone was running from it. "Storm's not letting up tonight. You can sleep here, there's a spare blanket in the chest, but in the morning I'll need to know what you're planning." For the first time since they arrived, May's eyes softened. "Thank you, mister," she whispered. Sani only nodded, rising to check the windows out, ensuring the shutters were tight against the wind. He set an old rifle by the door, just in case, and unrolled an extra blanket near the hearth. The girls curled up together, grateful for the warmth and shelter. As the fire burned low and the girls drifted into uneasy sleep, Sani sat at the table, staring into the embers. He wondered what storms these two had truly weathered before reaching his door. Out here, everyone had a story, and most of them were written in scars and silence. He told himself he wouldn't get involved, that by sunrise they'd be gone, and his life would return to quiet. But even as he tried to believe it, Sani felt the weight of their arrival settling over him, like the first hint of trouble, or maybe the first sign that peace, once broken, can never be quite the same again. Night deepened, and the storm outside grew harsher, rattling the shutters so hard that even May woke once with a start. Lila pulled her sister closer, whispering quiet reassurances as Sani watched from his spot at the table. He didn't sleep much, never did when strangers were under his roof. Old habits from harder years kept him wary, always listening for trouble, even when it came in the shape of two tired girls seeking warmth. As the fire crackled low, memories flickered in Sani's mind. He remembered other nights spent alone, cold gnawing at his bones, years when no one would have bothered to offer him shelter. His thoughts drifted back to when he was a boy, traveling with his mother between camps, learning early that trust was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. It was one reason he'd built his ranch at the edge of nowhere, so peace could finally be his, unbothered by the world's demands. But as the wind howled, he found himself glancing toward the sleeping girls, their faces softened by the glow of embers. He saw in them something he'd tried to forget, a desperate kind of hope, battered but still alive. Maybe, he wondered, peace was never meant to be lived alone. Dawn broke slow and gray, clouds hanging low and heavy as the rain eased to a drizzle. Sani moved quietly through his morning routine, brewing strong coffee and checking on the livestock. By the time he returned, Lila was already awake, her hair tangled but her eyes sharp. May slept on, exhausted beyond measure. "Storm's past," Sani said quietly, pouring coffee into 3 cups. "But it'll be mud out there for a day, maybe more." Lila accepted her cup, hands wrapped tight around the tin for warmth. She glanced at May, then at Sani, as if weighing her words before she spoke. "We'll go as soon as she's able," she said. "We don't want to bring trouble to your door." Sani shook his head. "Trouble finds its own way, out here. I'd rather know what I'm facing." Lila looked down at her cup, silent. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but clear. "We're not thieves, if that's what you think. We ran from our uncle's ranch, west of the river. After our father died, he took us in. But he's not the man folks believe. Her voice caught, and she swallowed hard, eyes shining with a mix of anger and shame. "He hurt May. I tried to stop him. That's why we ran." Sani let her words settle in the air, his own heart tightening with old familiar anger. He'd seen too much cruelty, too many men hiding their violence behind polite smiles and church pews. He nodded once, his face set. "You're safe here, at least for now." Lila blinked, surprised. "You believe us?" "I don't need to know every detail to see the truth in your eyes," Sani replied quietly. "No one should have to run for their life." A long silence stretched between them. The wind outside calmed, leaving only the soft sounds of the house waking to a new day. When May finally stirred, her face still pale but her eyes brighter, Lila helped her sit up, brushing a hand over her sister's hair. Sani brought over a bowl of oats, hot and sweetened with a rare spoonful of honey. May ate slowly, savoring each bite, and when she finished, she looked up at Sani with shy gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. He only nodded, turning his attention to the window. Out in the distance, a hawk soared above the drenched earth, and the muddy yard gleamed under the weak sun. "If your uncle's men come looking, they'll find this place," Sani said, "but I won't hand you over. Not without hearing what they have to say first." Lila straightened, a spark of determination in her eyes. "We don't want to put you in danger. If you tell us to leave, we will." Sani met her gaze, steady and unwavering. "This land doesn't belong to men like your uncle. Not anymore. You'll stay until you're ready to move on." A small smile flickered on Lila's lips, the first sign of hope since she'd crossed his threshold. She squeezed May's hand, and the 2 girls sat quietly, absorbing the warmth and safety that, for once, didn't feel like it would be snatched away. The day passed slowly. Sani worked outside, mending a broken fence and checking the pasture, always with one eye on the horizon. Inside, the girls swept the floor, folded blankets, and washed dishes without being asked. They moved quietly, careful not to intrude, but Sani noticed the small signs that spoke of gratitude: bread left for him on the table, water fetched without complaint. Late in the afternoon, while Sani repaired a gate, Lila appeared at the edge of the yard. She watched him work for a moment before stepping closer. "You ever miss having family around?" she asked, her voice tentative. Sani paused, leaning on the fence post. He thought of his mother, of kin lost to distance and time. "Sometimes. Most days I just try to remember what kindness feels like. It's easy to forget out here." Lila nodded, her eyes bright with understanding. "Me too." They stood together in the fading light, the silence between them no longer awkward, but almost companionable. As dusk fell, Sani realized something had changed. His ranch was still the same, quiet, windswept, wild, but the feeling inside was different. The walls, once cold and empty, now echoed with the soft, steady rhythm of shared survival, but peace in the west was a fragile thing. And as the sun dipped below the hills, Sani knew deep down that nothing gold ever stayed, not without a fight. The next morning, Sani rose before dawn, muscles already tense with the anticipation of what the day might bring. In the hush before sunrise, he found himself staring out across the mist-shrouded fields, listening for anything out of place. The sense of being watched, of some unseen threat inching closer, hung in the air, sharper than the bite of cold wind. Inside, the sisters slept, tangled together on the cot by the hearth. Lila's arm draped protectively around May, even in sleep, a silent promise that this time she wouldn't let anyone take her away. Sani moved quietly through his chores, keeping the barn door slightly ajar so he could watch the yard. He noticed tracks by the gate, fresh, muddy, boots too large for the girls. He wiped his hands on his trousers, heart pounding. It was just a matter of time. Ranches out here didn't stay secrets for long, especially when someone was desperate to get back what they thought belonged to them. By mid-morning, May was awake, moving better but still stiff with pain. She clung to Lila, who kept glancing nervously at the window. The silence between them was heavy, filled with all the things they didn't dare say. Sani joined them for breakfast, setting 3 plates on the table. He noticed the way Lila's hands shook as she ate, the tight line of worry on her brow. "I'll need to ride into town for supplies," Sani said after a while, his voice even but watchful. "You two stay inside. Bolt the door behind me and don't answer to anyone but me." Lila looked up, fear flickering in her eyes. "Is someone coming?" Sani hesitated, then nodded. "Your uncle's got long arms. If he's looking, he'll find you. But I won't let anyone take you without a fight." May's eyes grew wide. "Are you going to get hurt because of us?" Sani shook his head, managing a small smile. "You're not the reason men do bad things, May. Some men just don't know when to stop." After he saddled his old roan and rode out, Sani kept his eyes open, every shadow on the road a possible ambush. He stopped at the general store, exchanging curt words with the shopkeeper, a man who always seemed to know more than he let on. Sani bought flour, beans, coffee, and a sack of dried apples, all the while watching the other men in the shop. The talk was uneasy. 2 men, strangers, but with the swagger of bounty hunters, leaned against the porch as Sani left. One spit tobacco, squinting at Sani. "Quiet out your way lately, Apache," he drawled. Sani said nothing, only nodded, mounting his horse with slow deliberation. He felt their eyes follow him all the way down the muddy street. In town, silence could be more dangerous than words. Back at the ranch, Lila paced the length of the house, checking the window for the 100th time. May busied herself arranging the firewood, but her hands trembled. Every gust of wind, every creak of the roof, made them start. Finally, Sani returned, boots muddy, brow furrowed in thought. Lila ran to the door, relief etched on her face. "Did anyone follow you?" "Not today," Sani replied, unloading supplies, "but they know I'm sheltering someone. They're waiting for a reason to come out here." May's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want you to get hurt, Sani. Maybe we should go." "No." His answer was quiet, but firm. "Running don't always save you. Sometimes it just brings the wolves closer. We stay. We watch. We decide together." That night, a storm swept through again. This time thunder rolling close enough to shake the windows, lightning illuminating the yard in stark flashes. Sani sat by the door, rifle across his knees. Lila stayed up too, watching him, her own eyes fierce. "Why are you helping us?" she asked quietly, voice barely louder than the rain. Sani stared into the fire, searching for an answer that didn't sound like a wound. "Because I know what it means to be cast out. Because I know how it feels to want to trust someone and be afraid to. And because sometimes you help not for reward, but because you remember what it's like when no one helped you." Lila nodded, her gaze softening. "My father used to say there are 2 kinds of people. Those who lock their doors at night and those who leave a lamp burning, hoping someone lost finds the light." Sani's lips twitched at the corners. "Your father was right, but sometimes you gotta be both." A tense silence stretched as the storm raged. Every now and then, Sani stood to peer out the window, heart pounding. He half expected to see lanterns on the road, angry men with torches or guns. But the night passed without incident, just rain, thunder, and the slow, steady breathing of the 2 girls who trusted him enough to sleep. But as Sani finally drifted into uneasy rest near dawn, he knew the peace wouldn't last. The world outside was full of men who believed what they wanted mattered more than anyone else's life. And trouble, once it knew your name, never stayed away for long. By the time dawn broke, the storm had faded, leaving the ranch shrouded in an uneasy hush. The land, soaked and heavy, seemed to be holding its breath. Sani moved through his chores with a practiced calm, but his mind spun with worry. He paused often, scanning the tree line for movement, listening for the sound of horses or raised voices. The tension felt like a hand around his throat. Inside the house, May awoke first. She limped quietly to the kitchen, trying to be useful, her small hands clumsy as she gathered kindling for the fire. Lila soon joined her, dark circles under her eyes. She barely spoke, glancing repeatedly at the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. Sani watched them both, recognizing the look. He'd worn it himself once, long ago when he was the one hiding from men who thought they owned everything. He found himself wishing he could offer them more than just a roof. Safety, he realized, was a promise that could be broken by anyone with enough power or anger. Mid-morning brought a knock at the door, a dull, heavy sound that sent May ducking behind the table and Lila stiffening, her eyes wide. Sani signaled for silence, then crossed the floor, his rifle resting out of sight but close at hand. He opened the door just a crack. On the porch stood the shopkeeper from town, hat in hand, rain still dripping from his shoulders. "Mornin', Sani," he said, his voice low and nervous. "Thought you ought to know. There's been questions asked about your ranch. 2 men rode in last night. Mean-looking, talking about some missing girls. Said they might ride out this way." Sani met his gaze, reading the warning in the man's tired eyes. "Thank you, Billy. You see which way they went?" Billy nodded. "Headed north out of town at dawn. Might be here by midday. I'd keep 'em inside if I were you." He hesitated, then leaned in. "You need anything, you send word. Not everyone in town's forgot what you did for them last spring." Sani nodded once, a rare warmth in his voice. "Appreciate it, Billy." As the shopkeeper rode off, Sani shut the door, locking it behind him. He turned to Lila and May. "We don't have much time. You'll stay inside, no matter what. Don't open the door unless it's me. You hear?" May nodded, her lips pressed together. Lila swallowed, then forced herself to stand taller. "We won't let them take us," she whispered, more for her own reassurance than his. Sani nodded, setting about preparing the house. He moved furniture quietly but with purpose, stacking a trunk beneath the back window, checking the latches on the doors, pulling down a battered old shotgun from the shelf. He could feel the weight of his own choices pressing in. To shelter these girls was to draw a line he couldn't uncross. Midday brought the distant sound of hooves. Sani watched from the window as 2 riders appeared on the far edge of the property. One was burly and hard-eyed, the other lean and mean, both with rifles slung across their backs. They rode slow, surveying the ranch with the predatory ease of men who'd done this sort of thing before. Lila and May huddled in the back room, hearts pounding. Sani stepped onto the porch, his stance calm but ready. "Can I help you?" he called out, voice steady as stone. The men reined in near the gate, not dismounting. "We're looking for a couple of runaways," the big one said. "Heard tell they might have passed through here. You seen any strangers, Apache?" Sani's face didn't change. "No strangers here," he said, voice cool. "Just me and my land." The lean man spat into the mud. "You mind if we look around?" Sani shook his head, hand resting casually near his belt. "Private land. No one comes here uninvited. You got a warrant." A tense pause. The men exchanged glances, weighing their options. The big one finally grunted. "We'll be back with the sheriff then." "You do that," Sani replied, his eyes hard. "I'll have coffee waiting." They turned and rode off, but Sani knew better than to think the danger had passed. He waited until they were out of sight before re-entering the house. He found Lila crouched by the window, watching with wild eyes. "They'll come back," she whispered. "I know," Sani said, "but we'll be ready." He gathered the girls close, speaking quietly, outlining what to do if the men returned. "May, you go to the root cellar. Lila, you stay close to the back door. Keep a knife handy. If I say run, you run for the woods. Follow the creek west. Don't stop until you're sure no one's behind you." May's eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded bravely. Lila swallowed hard, jaw clenched. That night, Sani barely slept. He sat by the window, rifle in his lap, watching the moon drift behind thick clouds. He thought about the old stories his grandfather used to tell, about standing your ground, about the cost of doing what's right, even when no one's watching. He realized then that courage wasn't about not being afraid, It was about standing firm, even when fear felt bigger than hope. And as dawn crept over the ranch, bringing with it a new, uncertain day, Sunny knew the hardest fight was yet to come. The next morning arrived pale and raw, with a heavy fog blanketing the ranch. Sunny moved through the quiet house like a sentinel, checking the windows, double-locking the doors, and loading cartridges into his old rifle. Lila and May stayed close, their silence deepening with every anxious glance at the cloudy sky. The sense of impending danger pressed in around them, suffocating in its heaviness. Breakfast was a tense affair. Sunny tried to eat, but found his appetite lacking. May poked at her porridge, eyes fixed on the tabletop. Lila, jaw set, forced herself to chew and swallow, determined not to show fear. They knew the men could return at any moment, and this time, Sunny suspected, they would not come with words. By mid-morning, the sound of horses drifted up from the lane, this time louder, more deliberate. 3 men appeared at the gate, the 2 from yesterday joined by a third, the sheriff, his badge glinting from under his battered coat. The men dismounted with slow, theatrical movements, spreading out as they approached the porch. Sunny stood in the doorway, every muscle tense but his expression unreadable. "Morning, Sheriff," he greeted, voice measured. The sheriff nodded stiffly. "Morning, Sunny. Got reports of 2 missing girls. They run off from a homestead north of here. Their folks are worried sick." Sunny let the silence stretch, his gaze never dropping. "A lot of folks pass through these parts. Not everyone has a place to call home." The sheriff looked past Sunny, as if hoping to catch a glimpse of someone inside. "We'd like to take a look around, just to be sure." "No warrant, no entry," Sunny replied, his voice calm but unyielding. "That's the law." The big man from the day before stepped forward, face darkening. "What are you hiding, Apache? You always been so quick to stand up for troublemakers." Sunny stared him down, unflinching. "No one's hiding here, just people trying to live." The sheriff hesitated, caught between the men's bluster and the law he represented. He shifted his weight, glancing at the muddy yard. "Look, Sunny, you're a good man. You helped folks last spring when the river flooded. We're not looking for trouble, but if you're hiding someone—" "I'm not," Sunny cut in, his tone sharpening. "But you can search the grounds with me watching so long as you respect my house." A tense nod, and the men began their search, moving through the barn, the empty chicken coop, poking around the woodshed and water trough. Inside the house, Lila and May waited in the cramped root cellar, hearts pounding, clutching each other's hands. Every sound above felt like the end of hope. After half an hour, the sheriff returned, wiping sweat from his brow. "Nothing here but mud and hard work." The big man scowled, but the sheriff raised a hand. "That's enough. Let's go." As the men mounted up, the sheriff turned to Sunny. "If you see anything, if anyone needs help, you let us know." Sunny gave a curt nod, relief barely showing in his features. He watched as the 3 rode away, their forms swallowed by the fog. Once they were gone, Sunny hurried inside, lifting the trapdoor to the root cellar. Lila and May climbed out, faces pale and shaken but safe. May flung her arms around Sunny, trembling with silent gratitude. Lila managed a small, determined smile. "You were brave," Sunny told them quietly. "Both of you." The day dragged on, the weight of fear not lifting, but the worst seemed to have passed. May set to sweeping the floor, desperate for normalcy. Lila helped Sunny repair a broken fence post, her hands steady, her resolve hardening. The small moments of routine offered comfort. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Sunny shared a story from his childhood, a tale of a lost coyote pup found beneath a winter moon, how his grandmother had nursed it back to health, how the pup grew strong and learned to run free again. Lila listened, understanding the lesson woven between the words. Kindness isn't weakness, and those who are lost can always find a new home. May curled up beside the hearth, exhaustion overtaking her, while Lila sat up late with Sunny. The 2 talked softly about what came next, about the ranch, about safety, about hope. "Will we ever be truly safe here?" Lila asked, voice barely above a whisper. Sunny considered, the firelight flickering across his face. "Safety's never certain, but here you have a place. As long as I breathe, no one will take that from you." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and rain. The fog began to thin, revealing a sky full of quiet stars. The land felt different, less like a battleground, more like a sanctuary. Yet even as the world settled into uneasy peace, Sunny knew they couldn't let their guard down. The men who'd come looking might return, perhaps angrier, perhaps with more force. But something had changed inside the house. Lila and May were no longer just refugees. They were part of the ranch now, each with a place at the table, each with a reason to fight for tomorrow. And so, as night deepened, they slept not without fear, but with the first glimmers of hope that maybe, just maybe, the worst had passed, and something new was beginning to grow in the hard-won quiet of Sunny's land. The next days on the ranch passed with a tense, unspoken understanding. Lila, May, and Sunny fell into a rhythm that bordered on something like family, even as the threat outside remained. They worked side by side, patching fences, hauling water, tending to the garden that Sunny insisted would soon wake from its winter sleep. May found a strange comfort in the daily chores, her small hands learning quickly, her laughter returning in quiet bursts, usually when Sunny pretended not to see. But the outside world was not finished with them. On the fourth morning after the sheriff's visit, hoofbeats thundered in the distance, too many to be the usual patrol. Sunny spotted 5 riders on the horizon, approaching fast, dust billowing behind. His jaw tightened as he recognized the big man from before, this time leading the pack. There would be no polite search today. He ushered Lila and May inside. "Go to the root cellar. Stay silent no matter what happens. I'll come for you when it's safe." Lila squeezed his arm, her eyes fierce. "Don't let them hurt you," she whispered. Sunny offered her a fleeting, reassuring nod, then closed the trapdoor and moved to the porch, rifle in hand. The men pulled up hard in the yard, dismounting in a flurry of boots and curses. The sheriff wasn't with them now. This was private justice, and Sunny knew it. The leader spat in the dirt, sneering. "Enough games, Apache! We know you're hiding those girls!" Sunny's grip tightened on the rifle, but he kept it lowered. "You searched my house. You found nothing." "That's all there is," the big man's lips curled. "You think we care about the law out here?" One of the other men fanned out, circling toward the barn. Another prowled near the house, peering at windows. Sunny's mind raced. There were too many to stand against, not with bullets. He needed another way. Then a sudden commotion, May's terrified shriek from the cellar. The trap door had given her away, her panic rising. The big man lunged for the door, yanking it open, dragging both girls into the harsh morning light. May fought like a wildcat, but the man's grip was iron. Lila spat curses, kicking and twisting, refusing to be docile. Sunny's heart hammered as he leveled the rifle. "Let them go," he warned, voice deadly calm. "You lay a hand on them, and I swear you'll regret it." A cold silence fell. The leader's eyes narrowed. "We ain't here to bargain. Town wants its troublemakers gone. You're sheltering them. You'll pay the price." He shoved Lila forward, making her stumble to her knees. May tried to reach for her, only to be yanked back by another man. The situation was spinning out of control, one spark away from bloodshed. Sunny's finger hovered over the trigger, sweat cold on his brow. Lila looked up at Sunny, her gaze unwavering. "Don't let them take us," she said, her voice clear. "We belong here now." The big man laughed, cruel and loud. "You hear that? Even the wild ones know they're nothing but trouble. You want to fight for them, Apache? Go ahead, see how far you get." The other men jeered, drawing their own weapons, 2 pistols, a rusted shotgun, a length of chain. Sunny steadied himself, mind working furiously. He couldn't win a gunfight, not outnumbered, not with the girls at risk. He had to gamble. "I won't shoot unless you force me," Sunny declared, "but you'll have to drag me out dead if you want these girls." He tossed the rifle aside, stepping forward with hands raised, daring them to strike. The men hesitated, surprised by the sudden lack of threat. "You want to hurt someone? You do it to me, not them." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Lila, catching Sunny's cue, threw herself at the big man's legs, biting and kicking with ferocity born of desperation. May followed, wriggling free just long enough to knock the chain out of one attacker's hands. It was chaos, shouts, curses, the sharp crack of fists against flesh. Sani seized the opening, lunging at the leader, wrestling him to the ground. He caught a fist to the jaw, blood filling his mouth, but refused to yield. "Run!" he gasped, and Lila and May scrambled away, dodging boots and swinging arms. One of the men fired a pistol into the air. "Stop, or she gets it!" he bellowed, grabbing May by the arm. Lila froze, terror wrenching her features. But Sani didn't stop fighting. He forced the big man down, twisting his arm behind his back. The sudden arrival of a neighbor, a grizzled rancher drawn by the gunshot, changed everything. "What in blazes is going on?" he roared, shotgun leveled at the intruders. More figures appeared behind him, other neighbors, alerted by the noise, some with rifles, others with shovels and axes. The attackers faltered, glancing at the growing crowd. They released May, backing away. "This isn't over," the leader spat, cradling his twisted arm. But Sani stared him down, unbroken. When the men retreated, chased off by the watchful eyes of the ranching community, Sani finally dropped to his knees, breath ragged, arms trembling. Lila rushed to him, clutching his shoulders. May hugged his waist, sobbing with relief. It was over, for now. The cost was written in bruises and tears, but as Sani looked at the circle of neighbors, he realized something had shifted. He wasn't alone. The girls weren't alone. In the worst moment, when cruelty came calling, the land had rallied around them. And in that battered, hard-won peace, the meaning of home became something new, a place defended not just by fences and guns, but by the people who dared to call it theirs. The days following the standoff brought a tense, exhausted calm to Sani's ranch. News of what happened spread fast, riding the winds between ranches and the small town's wooden sidewalks. Some whispered the Apache had brought trouble to their doorstep, but many more, those who'd seen the bruises on Lila's arms, the terror in May's eyes, spoke quietly of courage, of a line finally drawn against the old ways of fear and hate. Sani kept to his routine, but a change pulsed beneath every task. He checked fences and watered the garden, but every movement was more deliberate, every glance toward the horizon sharpened by worry. Lila, never one for idle rest, insisted on helping with repairs. She hammered boards, fetched nails, her wild hair falling in her eyes as she worked beside Sani without complaint. Her determination didn't go unnoticed. May, following her lead, swept out the barn and fed the chickens with a stubborn diligence that made Sani smile even in his fatigue. Each evening they gathered for simple suppers, beans, cornbread, dried venison. The meals tasted richer for what they'd survived. Conversation began to fill the silences. May asked about the stars, Sani naming each bright point in the Apache tongue, his voice soft, patient. Lila, restless, quizzed him about horses, the art of reading weather in the wind and clouds, the tricks of surviving winter alone. Slowly, laughter returned, shaky at first, then stronger. But every time a horse passed on the distant road, all three paused, listening, waiting. Sani cleaned and reloaded his rifle nightly, placing it by the door just in case. One afternoon, the sheriff returned, but this time alone and on foot, hat in hand. He stopped at the edge of the porch, uncertain. "Mind if I come up, Sani?" Sani eyed him coolly, then nodded. Lila and May watched from inside, tense. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Heard what happened. Word is you stood down a pack of angry men without firing a shot. Some folks in town are grateful for that. Others, well, they're saying you're trouble." "I did what was right," Sani replied, voice flat. "That's all." The sheriff shifted awkwardly. "I came to say this. Those girls can stay. Town council can squawk, but the law says nothing about kin or kindness." He paused, searching for words. "You watch your back, though. There are men who don't forget being made to look fools." Sani accepted the warning with a slow nod. "I always do." When the sheriff left, Lila came out, tension uncoiling in her shoulders. "So we're safe now?" she asked. Sani didn't sugarcoat the truth. "We're safer. That's enough." That night, as darkness settled and the prairie wind sang through the windows, Lila lay awake. She stared at the ceiling, the events of the past days spinning through her mind. She thought of the men's hands, rough and cruel, of Sani stepping between them and danger, of the way May had clung to her, trembling. For years, Lila had survived by expecting the worst, by trusting no one. But here, for the first time, hope flickered, a cautious, unsteady hope. Down the hall, May snuggled under her quilt, eyes heavy but mind-churning. In the dim lamplight, she whispered, "Are we really going to stay, Lila? Or will they send us away?" Lila slipped into May's bed, wrapping an arm around her. "No one's sending us anywhere. We're part of this place now. Sani said so, and he keeps his word." May hesitated. "He's not like the others. He's good." Lila squeezed her gently. "Yeah, he is. And so are we." Outside, Sani sat on the porch, watching the sky. The stars glimmered above, silent and ancient. He thought of the tribe he'd left behind, the neighbors who now looked to him with respect, the two girls sleeping under his roof. The world hadn't grown kinder overnight, but a seed had been planted, a sense that maybe, just maybe, different people could find belonging together, not despite their scars, but because of them. The next morning, May was first to wake, sun dappling her face. She found Sani in the kitchen, brewing strong coffee and heating bread over the fire. She padded over, still sleepy. "Can you teach me to ride today?" Sani smiled. "After chores, every good rider learns to work before they ride." By noon, May sat high on a shaggy brown pony, Lila leading by the bridle, Sani steady at the flank. Laughter echoed across the yard as May found her balance, her smile wide and real. Lila watched, chest swelling with pride, not just for May, but for herself. She'd survived worse than this. She could learn to thrive. Later, while the girls cleaned up, Sani knelt beside the garden, pressing his hands into the warming earth. Life was stubborn. It clawed its way back, season after season, refusing to give in to drought, frost, or cruelty. That afternoon, Lila found Sani mending tack in the barn. "You meant what you said, right? That we belong here?" He nodded. "I meant it. You've both earned your place." For a moment, Lila stood quiet, heart full. Then, in an awkward rush, she threw her arms around him. Sani stiffened, startled, then returned the embrace, careful and gentle. He'd never been a father, but something close to it had grown between them, a bond forged by adversity, tested by loyalty. When dusk fell, all three stood on the porch, watching the sun slip behind the hills. The world remained uncertain, danger still lurking at its edges. But for tonight, the ranch felt like a fortress, built not from wood or stone, but from the courage of three souls who refused to be broken. In the weeks that followed, a gentle but unspoken routine settled over the ranch, a routine that stitched itself into the lives of Sani, Lila, and May. The land responded to their care. Patches of green poked through the brown prairie, chickens scratched contentedly near the barn, and the sound of laughter, something long absent, returned in fits and starts, sometimes so unexpected that it startled even those who made it. Each day began early, with Sani rising before dawn to stoke the fire and check the perimeter. May became his willing shadow, eager to learn how to spot a fox's trail, how to set a snare, and how to mend a fence with wire and determination. She soaked up every lesson, her eyes alight with purpose. Sani, for his part, found himself growing protective in ways that surprised him. When May slipped and scraped her knee, he bandaged it without scolding, quietly proud when she returned to the chores without a whimper. Lila, still wary of kindness, threw herself into work. She cleaned the stables, learned to patch up torn saddles, and proved herself invaluable during a late spring storm that ripped a corner off the hen house roof. Without waiting for instruction, she hauled a ladder and hammered boards in the wind, hair lashing her face. Sani joined her, the two working side by side in rain and mud until the last nail was in. When they finished, breathless and soaked, Lila managed a shaky grin. "Guess we make a good team," she said, half teasing, half testing. Sani only nodded, but the warmth in his eyes said everything. But not all in town were pleased to see the girls thrive. As days lengthened, word of their presence and Sani's stand against the mob wound its way into the darker corners of the settlement. An old rancher named Blake, who'd once tried to drive Sani off his own land, made it his business to stir up resentment. "How you letting strays take over your house now?" he spat one day at the general store. "Can't be too careful. Folks talk." The words stung, but Sani shrugged them off in public, never giving the man the satisfaction of seeing him riled. Privately, though, the worry lingered. He spoke to Lila one night on the porch, the moon cold and white overhead. "You two could leave if you want. Try your luck elsewhere. Start fresh." Lila shook her head. "We've done enough running. May's safe here. So am I. I want to help. I want to earn my keep, not just hide." Sani studied her, seeing the fire behind her words, and nodded. "Then you stay. But you both need to be ready. There are still men who'd see you gone." One evening, a rider appeared at dusk, a boy from the edge of town. He carried a note sealed with red wax, trembling as he handed it to Sani. "Pa says you best watch your back. Some folks are planning something." Then, without waiting for thanks, he rode off into the rising dark. Sani read the note, jaw tightening. The message was crude but clear. "You don't belong. Leave, or we'll make you." He didn't show it to Lila or May. Instead, he quietly doubled the night patrols, moved the horses closer to the house, and made sure the old shotgun was loaded and hidden just inside the barn door. Still, he didn't live in fear. He taught the girls how to defend themselves, how to stay alert, how to use a slingshot, and even Jeet with Lila, how to shoot. On a rare afternoon of rest, Sani took May and Lila out to the wildflowers that carpeted a meadow beyond the far fence. There, under an endless sky, May gathered bright yellow blooms and braided them into Lila's hair. Lila, at first embarrassed, let her expression softening. "You two belong here," Sani said quietly, surprising himself with how fiercely he meant it. That night, as dusk fell, Lila and May cooked a meal of roasted potatoes and wild greens. When Sani sat at the table, Lila spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I know we bring trouble sometimes, but we'll stand with you. Whatever comes." Sani met her gaze. "It's not trouble to care for someone. It's just life. And I'd rather stand with you both than face the world alone." May, sleepy but smiling, laid her head on the table. "We're family now, aren't we?" Lila nodded. "We are. Nobody gets left behind." As the fire in the hearth burned low, a storm gathered on the horizon, dark clouds, rolling thunder, the promise of rain and challenge. Yet inside the ranch house, warmth bloomed. It was the warmth of belonging, of second chances, of three people who'd each survived enough loneliness to know that real family is chosen, built with grit, loyalty, and an unspoken promise to protect. Outside, the first drops of rain tapped gently on the roof, a lullaby for the battered, stubborn hearts beneath. And in that moment, Sani knew. No threat, no old feud, no whisper from the past could break what they were building together. The storm rolled in with a fury the next night, rattling windows and shaking the rafters. But it wasn't just the weather that unsettled the ranch. As the rain battered the land, Sani lay awake, his mind spinning with unease. Every shadow seemed longer, every howl of the wind a possible warning. He double-checked the barn door, set extra logs on the fire, and kept his boots near the bed. May, who usually slept through anything, woke to the sound of voices, low, urgent, drifting in from the front porch. She crept out of bed, Lila close behind, and found Sani sitting by the door, his face set and quiet. He motioned them to stay back. Outside, in the downpour, the silhouettes of three men hovered at the gate, Blake and two others, their shapes barely visible through sheets of rain. Blake called out, his voice slurred with whiskey and anger. "Thought we made it clear you don't belong here, Apache. You and your strays, last warning." Sani stood without flinching, lantern in hand. "I heard you, but this is my land, and these girls are under my roof. I won't be run off by threats, Blake. Go home." The answer only stoked their fury. One of the men hurled a rock, shattering a pane of glass. May squeaked. Lila pulled her close, and Sani stepped outside, shutting the door behind him. The tension was thick as mud. For a long moment, only the storm answered. Then Blake took a step forward, shotgun slung over his shoulder. "You really want to test this, Sani? You'd better be sure." Sani's eyes were calm, but a steel edge sharpened his voice. "You come for trouble, you'll find it, but I won't fight unless you force my hand." For a moment, it looked as if violence was inevitable. But then Lila, unable to bear it any longer, flung open the door and stood beside Sani, her chin raised. "You want to hurt someone, you go through me too, and if you do, everyone in this county will know it." Blake hesitated, taken aback. The other men shifted uneasily. None of them expected defiance from a girl, much less two. May was now peeking from behind Lila's legs, her eyes bright with stubbornness. "Think real hard, Blake," Sani said, voice steady over the wind. "There's nothing for you here. Only more shame if you push." Blake spat, the fight draining out of him. "This isn't over. People don't forget." He turned, his companions following, their bravado washed away by rain and resistance. When the men had gone, Sani shut the door and slumped against it, relief and exhaustion finally showing. Lila and May hovered nearby, shaken but proud. "You shouldn't have put yourselves at risk," he scolded gently. Lila only shrugged. "You took us in. We're not just going to stand by and watch you fight alone." That night, sleep came slow. Sani checked on the animals twice, then sat by the dying fire, thinking about how quickly safety could turn fragile. But something had changed. It wasn't just him against the world anymore. They faced it together now. The next morning, the sky cleared, washed fresh by the storm. Blake's threats had left a mark, but not the one he'd hoped for. News spread quickly. Sani's stand, the girls' bravery, the way the intruders slunk home like beaten dogs. Some in town grumbled, but others quietly approved. A neighbor brought a loaf of bread, muttering, "Not everyone here's blind, Sani." Another left a bucket of eggs by the gate with no name attached. May found hope in these small gestures, skipping through the house with a smile. Lila watched, amazed that a place so lonely had become a home. "You think they'll come back?" May asked one afternoon, helping Sani stack wood. "Maybe," he said, "but we'll be ready, and this time, we won't be alone." Lila set her jaw. "We're not the only ones who've been hurt by people like Blake. Maybe it's time someone stood up for all of us." Her words planted a seed. Over the next days, folks Sani hadn't spoken to in years began to drift by. Old cowboys, widows, a couple with a newborn, offering to lend a hand or just passing the time on the porch. It wasn't a flood of support, but it was enough to tip the balance. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Sani found Lila on the porch, staring at the horizon. "You know, I used to think the world was only made for the strong," she murmured. "But maybe it's for those who hold on, who choose to stay, even when they're scared." Sani nodded, quiet pride in his eyes. "Strength isn't in fists or guns, Lila. It's in standing for what matters, even when nobody's watching." May squeezed between them, grinning. "Like us." Sani ruffled her hair. "Like us?" The shadows lengthened, and as they sat together, a sense of peace settled. A fragile but real hope, built on trust, loyalty, and the belief that no matter what came next, they could face it as a family. The days rolled into weeks, and while Blake and his men kept their distance, the sense of watchfulness never quite faded. The ranch was busier now. There was always something to mend, feed, or haul. Sani sometimes caught himself marveling at how quickly things could change. The girls had only been with him a few weeks, yet it felt as if their laughter and arguments belonged to the house as much as the beams and windows. May's energy filled every room, her voice floating on the breeze as she helped Lila collect eggs or chase after a runaway goat. She no longer woke screaming in the night. Instead, she'd pad barefoot into the kitchen before dawn, always eager to start the day. Sani taught her how to read the weather in the color of the morning sky, how to set a fence straight, and how to spot the tracks of coyotes in the dust. She soaked up every lesson, her confidence growing with each small success. Lila grew quieter, but not withdrawn. She watched Sani work, mimicked his patience, and picked up the skills she'd need if she ever had a place of her own. One evening, as they shelled beans on the porch, she asked, "Why did you take us in? Wasn't it easier to live alone?" Sani thought a moment, the setting sun warming his face. "Maybe, but easier isn't always better. Sometimes the world throws us together for a reason. Sometimes you need to give what you wish someone had given you. Lila nodded, lost in thought. Later that night, she wrote in her journal by the dim light of the fire, the pages filling with words she never thought she'd say out loud. Family isn't blood. It's who comes back for you when it matters most. With spring's arrival, new life began to stir across the land. Crocuses pushed through the last snow near the barn. Calves tottered on shaky legs, and birds built nests under the eaves. Sani, Lila, and May planted potatoes and carrots in the back field, their hands muddy and spirits high. Sometimes the neighbors joined in, sharing seeds and stories. May made friends with a girl from the next farm over, and soon their laughter drifted over the fence, a sound that brought Sani unexpected joy. But as the world woke, so did old wounds. One afternoon, a letter arrived for Sani, the address written in a careful, unfamiliar hand. He hesitated before opening it, and when he did, the words inside shook him. The tribal council wanted to speak with him, a formal request, stamped and signed. He hadn't set foot among his own people in years, not since old hurts and harsh words had sent him into exile. Lila noticed the change in him that evening. "You're worried," she said quietly. He didn't lie. "I am. They want to see me. Not sure why." May listened in, her brow furrowed. "Are you leaving?" Sani smiled, reassuring her. "I'm not leaving you, but I need to face this. It's time I stopped running from my own people." The days before he left were tense, but the girls kept the ranch running, feeding the animals, hauling water, patching fences. Lila found herself taking charge, her voice calm and sure. She missed Sani, but she realized she was no longer helpless. May, sensing the weight in the air, clung to routine and kept Lila laughing. Sani returned 3 days later, his face somber but his shoulders relaxed. That night, he called the girls to the fire. "They wanted to know why I sheltered you, why I broke with the ways that kept us all apart. I told them the truth, that no rule or bloodline means more than mercy. They didn't all agree, but some did. Change comes slow, but it's coming." Lila let out a breath she'd been holding. "So, what now?" He looked at them, his gaze full of quiet affection. "Now we keep building. We make this place what we want it to be, not what others expect." The ranch became more than just a patch of land. Sani and the girls started a new routine. Every Sunday, the table filled with neighbors, Apache, settlers, a few loners and misfits who found their way. Lila baked bread, May picked wildflowers, and Sani shared stories, laughter, and sometimes even old sorrows that needed letting go. With each passing week, walls that had once separated people in the valley slowly came down. A new kind of family took shape, one made not from tradition or fear, but from choice and kindness. May learned to ride, her laughter ringing out over the fields, and Lila planted a small garden with seeds gifted by a neighbor. Sani stood back sometimes, watching it all, and felt a peace he'd never known before. And though the world outside the ranch still held dangers, prejudice or hardship storms, inside their walls, they had carved out a place where everyone belonged, no matter how they'd arrived. The promise of spring grew brighter, and for the first time in a long while, each of them began to believe that hope was more than just a word whispered at the end of a hard day. As summer approached, the rhythms of ranch life settled into something that felt almost sacred, a web of small, steady rituals that bound the three together and rooted them deeper into the land. Lila rose before sunrise most mornings, slipping quietly from her bedroll to stoke the kitchen fire, her mind already ticking through the day's work. May, usually a bundle of restless energy, had finally found a kind of peace in routine. She brushed the horses, tended the chickens, and learned how to mend a broken fence post without complaint. Sani taught them both the old ways and the new, how to read the wind, when to gather wild herbs, and how to spot trouble before it arrived. Despite the growing calm, change hovered just at the edges. News filtered in from the wider world, talk of new railroads, more settlers, distant laws that crept ever closer. Some nights, Sani sat on the porch with Lila, his face thoughtful, his words careful. "The world's always moving," he'd say, watching the stars. "But out here, we decide what matters. This land will change, but it doesn't have to change who we are inside. Lila carried his words with her as she learned to wield both plow and pen, writing letters for neighbors and helping translate for families new to the valley. The community, once wary, had begun to accept them. Even Blake, the rancher who'd once threatened Sanny, started stopping by with small offerings, a jug of cider, a bag of flour. He never apologized outright, but the gesture was its own kind of peace. One hot afternoon, May returned from the creek in tears. She'd encountered a group of boys from town, boys who knew her story, who taunted her with names and stones. She hid her face in Lila's shoulder, trembling. Lila's anger flared, but she remembered Sanny's patience. Instead of storming out, she comforted May, then went to Sanny. He listened quietly, then called May over. "There's no shame in tears," he said, "but don't let their words root in your heart. They speak from fear, not truth. You're stronger than you know, May, and out here we stand together." That night, the three of them sat by the fire. May, still sniffling, asked, "Will it always be this hard?" Sanny's eyes softened. "Maybe. But every good thing is hard before it's easy. And you're not alone. We face it together." The conversation shifted, the fire crackled, and gradually May's spirits lifted. She fell asleep with her head in Lila's lap, the weight of the day fading into dreams. Lila met Sanny's gaze across the flames. "You did more for us than anyone ever has," she said quietly. He shook his head. "You did it yourselves. I just gave you a place to start." Days passed, and the garden flourished. The valley buzzed with bees and laughter. The porch became a gathering place, not just for the three of them, but for neighbors, passing travelers, and even the occasional lost soul looking for a meal or a kind word. Lila and May became known for their hospitality, their courage, and their willingness to help anyone who knocked at the gate. But one night, as a summer storm rolled in, Sanny's past returned in the form of a stranger at the door, a figure from his early years bearing news of trouble in the east. "Your name carries weight," the man said, rain dripping from his hat. "Old grudges die slow. There are men coming and they don't forget." Sanny's jaw tightened, but he didn't hesitate. He turned to Lila and May. "There may be danger. I want you to be ready." "If I say go, you take the horses and head for the hills," Lila protested, but Sanny cut her off gently. "This is my fight. I won't let harm come to you." May stood, her fists clenched. "We're not running. Not unless you do." Sanny looked at the two of them, one fierce, one afraid, both brave. He realized then that the ranch wasn't just his refuge anymore, it belonged to all of them. The storm broke that night, rain lashing the roof, thunder shaking the windows. But no one came. The threat passed, leaving behind only the memory of fear and the relief of another dawn. Sanny's decision was clear. He would not hide from his past, but he would not face it alone. In the days that followed, he wrote letters to old friends and enemies alike, offering peace, inviting conversation instead of conflict. Some responded with kindness, others with suspicion, but the effort changed something fundamental in the valley. A new understanding began to grow, rooted in the choices Sanny, Lila, and May made every day. Choices for mercy over anger, hope over fear. By the end of summer, the ranch had become more than a home. It was a symbol, a place where anyone could come, so long as they brought respect and a willingness to help. The scars from old wounds faded, replaced by bonds stronger than blood. And so, as the fields turned gold and the nights grew cool, Sanny, Lila, and May sat together on the porch, content in a way none of them had ever imagined possible. The future would bring its challenges, but they faced it as a family, chosen and unbreakable. As the last golden days of summer slipped away, the sense of peace the three had fought to build was suddenly threatened by a distant sound, one that Sanny recognized instantly. Hoofbeats, not from neighbors or traders, but from a group riding fast and without caution, dust rising on the horizon as the sun dipped behind the hills. May spotted them first. She was in the yard, arms deep in the wash bucket, when she froze, her eyes fixed on the ridgeline. "Someone's coming," she called, voice tight. Lila and Sanny hurried out, the air thick with tension. Sanny's hand instinctively reached for the rifle resting behind the door, But he didn't raise it. He'd vowed to protect, not provoke. Still, the old habits of war and wandering could not be easily shaken. The riders, 4 men, hard-faced and unfamiliar, drew closer, their horses sweating and eyes sharp. The lead rider, a man with sunburned cheeks and a battered hat, stopped a few yards from the porch. He scanned the small ranch, his gaze pausing on May, then Lila, before settling on Sani. "We're looking for someone," the man said, voice flat. "Heard an Apache was harboring runaways. That true?" Sani met his gaze. "Steady. This is my home. These women are my family. You got business here. You speak it plain. Otherwise, you move on." The rider snorted, shifting in his saddle. "We ain't looking for trouble. But there's men in town who don't like the idea of folks hiding out. They pay for answers." Lila stepped forward before she could stop herself, her hands trembling, but voice firm. "No one's hiding. We belong here. If you want trouble, you'll find it." For a moment, tension crackled. The wind died, and even the chickens grew silent. The man's hand hovered over his holster, and May's breath came in shallow gasps. Sani spoke again, softer this time, but more dangerous for it. "You can leave now, or stay and see how we handle threats out here. Either way, you'll get your answer." The rider's eyes narrowed, searching for weakness, but saw only resolve. He spat into the dirt, glanced at his men, and after a long, heavy pause, jerked his reins. "Come on." "Ain't worth it," he muttered, and they turned, riding back toward the ridge, the dust of their passing slow to settle. Relief washed over the ranch. May collapsed into Lila's arms, shaking. Sani put the rifle aside, his shoulders finally slumping. For a long while, no one spoke. When the danger had truly passed, Sani poured water for everyone and sat on the porch steps, silent and watchful. That evening, as dusk deepened into violet shadows, the 3 sat together under the old oak tree by the barn. May was quiet, staring into the middle distance. "I thought I'd have to run again," she said softly. "But I didn't. I stood here, with you." Lila squeezed her hand. "We face it together, remember?" Sani nodded. "You did more than stand. You showed them they couldn't break us." May looked at him, tears in her eyes, but also a new kind of pride. "I'm not the girl who ran away anymore." Sani's voice was gentle. "No, you're home now." The days after the confrontation felt different. Word spread fast in the valley, about the standoff, about the rancher who protected his family, Apache or not. Some came to offer quiet support, others kept their distance, wary but respectful. Lila, May, and Sani noticed the shift. Less hostility, more curiosity. The ranch became a place people talked about, not with suspicion, but with a growing respect. One evening, Blake, the old rancher who'd once threatened Sani, arrived at the gate with his daughter in tow. "You were right," he said simply, removing his hat. "Ain't no place for hate out here. Thought I'd help you mend the west fence. Looks like you could use a hand." It was all he said, but it was enough. Later, as May and Lila watched the sun set from the porch, Sani stood in the doorway, a soft smile on his lips. The storm had passed, not just the riders, but the shadow that had hung over their lives. They had claimed their place in the world by refusing to let fear decide for them. That night, after supper, Sani said, "We built this together. No one can take it from us now, not with guns, not with words." Lila reached for his hand, feeling the quiet power in his grip. "We're not running," she whispered. "Not ever again." May, her voice steady for the first time in months, nodded. "We're home." In the quiet that followed, the sounds of the ranch, horses snuffling, wind in the grass, the distant laughter of neighbors, became a kind of music. The 3 sat together long after the last light faded, letting hope settle in their bones. The danger had been real, the fear had been sharp, but what remained in the end was family, chosen, forged through trial, and stronger for all they'd survived. The autumn days settled softly over the ranch, painting the fields gold and rust, the air tinged with the scent of drying grass and wood smoke. The season of trial had passed, and in its place, a new rhythm flourished, gentle, patient, quietly celebratory. May's nightmares grew fewer. She'd wake sometimes, breathing hard, but now found Lila's hand reaching for hers in the dark, or Sani's voice low and reassuring nearby. Each morning, she'd find herself more at home in her own skin, the fear that once kept her silent replaced by the confidence of belonging. She learned to ride with Lila, to mend fences with Sani, to cook hearty meals that drew laughter and stories at the table each night. With each skill, each shared moment, her old shame receded, replaced by something stubborn and bright, dignity. Lila, too, changed. She no longer looked over her shoulder, haunted by the memory of roads taken in desperation. She walked taller, her laughter ringing clearer in the open air. She began sketching again, filling a battered notebook with scenes from their life, May braiding a horse's mane, Sani bent over a saddle, the vast sky blooming behind them. Art became her way of rooting herself, turning survival into celebration. Sani watched these changes with a deep, steady pride. He had opened his home out of a sense of justice, but found in these women a family, something he had never expected, nor realized how much he craved. Each day, he marveled at how the ranch, once quiet and solitary, now pulsed with warmth. The chickens clucked and horses stamped, sure, but it was May's laughter and Lila's singing, the scents of bread and stew that filled the air with hope. One afternoon, as they harvested the last of the season's beans, May paused, gazing at the hills. "If you hadn't taken me in, I'd have been lost." Her words were quiet, but heavy with meaning. Sani shook his head, a gentle smile on his lips. "You found us too. We all needed somewhere to start again." Lila added, "No one saves anyone alone. We chose this together." She looked at May, then Sani, her eyes shining. "We keep choosing it." The neighbors, once suspicious or even hostile, came around gradually, first with wary glances from the road, then with small gestures, a jar of jam left on the porch, a friendly wave at the market, a fence mended overnight. Blake, who had once threatened Sani, showed up again, this time with seeds and stories of his own family's beginnings. The boundaries that had separated them faded, little by little, as word spread of the ranch's resilience and the honesty of its inhabitants. By winter, Sani's ranch was no longer just a patch of land on the edge of the prairie. It had become a home, not just for Sani, May, and Lila, but for all who had ever felt pushed aside or unwanted. Children from nearby farms came to visit, helping with chores, listening to stories, learning to ride. May taught a few of them to sing. Lila sketched their portraits. Sani, once thought of as a quiet outsider, became a figure of trust and respect, sought for advice and help. On the first snowy evening, the three stood together by the hearth. Outside, wind howled and the world grew still. Inside, laughter and the glow of fire made the shadows dance. May looked at Lila, her heart full. "I used to wish I'd been someone else, somewhere else. But if I had, I wouldn't have found you." Lila smiled softly, drawing her close. "We made each other strong." Sani stoked the fire and turned to face them both. "You're not here because I pitied you. You're here because you never stopped fighting. That's what built this place." May looked at him, understanding settling deep in her chest. "You didn't just save me. You taught me how to save myself." They stood together, warmth and gratitude swirling around them like the snow falling quietly outside. As months passed, stories of their courage and kindness spread. Some said the ranch was blessed. Others called it a place for lost souls to find themselves. But for May, Lila, and Sani, it was simpler than that. It was home, earned, not given, chosen, not handed down. And for all who watched their journey, it was proof that family is not defined by blood, but by the willingness to stand by one another through storms, to open a door in the dark, to offer trust where there had only been suspicion. So, if you've ever felt alone, too wild or unwanted, remember May, Lila, and Sani. Remember that courage is sometimes quiet, a hand reaching out, a place at the table, a promise kept against all odds. That's how real change happens. That's how a home is made. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more true-hearted stories to life and reminds others that hope can grow in the unlikeliest places. If you'd like to hear another tale of resilience and chosen family, check out the next video right here. Until next time, remember, the truest strength is found in kindness, and the best families are those we build together.